Now, I think all of us, we know about the sustainable development goals, about the new urban agenda. So we don't really have to spell those things out. Now, what is very important in this two things is that unlike the INDCs, which is the intended nationally nationally determined contributions towards climate change. These are not commitments of the country, but these are more of agreed, internationally agreed, let's say, ways of doing things, agendas, which all member countries have chosen to follow. And and particularly SDG 11 and the new urban agenda of UN Habitat, they more or less act in sync, even though in the new urban agenda there is not specific mention of the SDG 11 targets as such. Yeah? So these remain to some extent separate but together. Now, if we are talking about what is important in these, I think the panelists will bring out those things. Now, as far as international, these kinds of agendas are concerned, it is but natural that they will, to a large extent, be general to accommodate, the wishes of almost 170 countries. And these were brought in through a process of negotiation and consultation. And finally, what comes is what is acceptable to everybody. Yeah? So it's not necessary that all these things are applicable to India. We might also, and there's been a lot of criticism also from experts, but what I think is it's not so important about what exactly is written there, but what are the takeaways that we can take and move forward in this country and in India. And what is, I think, very important is that both the New Urban Agenda as well as the SDGs, they require a systematic approach towards development. So the question is, can we put that in? The second question that I would raise is that, when we're talking about this whole thing about these words which are used again and again, sustainability, transformation, what do they mean in terms of our countries? Yeah? What are we talking about transforming? Is it institutions? Is it the status of the poor through inclusion? Is it, trying to improve the status of women? What are we talking about? Yeah, I think all these things. But so how do we activate this whole thing and give it shape is very important. And what do we mean by transformation? Yeah, is it going to happen through government programs, especially in the urban sector? Now we're talking about transformation through smart cities and through the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana and Amrut and all that. Is it transformation, or are we getting into incremental change? How do we deal with that? What are our institutions all about? Yeah? So these are issues which needs to be debated. What is important for this group is that what is the role of civil society in all this. Civil society as a space, I think, is a very important space. It is not a space where considerations of power and electoral politics intervene. Yeah? It is also, you can say it's a kind of a conversational space which can mediate between different knowledge systems and ways of doing things. And it can, have a better perception of the kind of trade-offs which we have to make to achieve something, whether it's sustainable development, whether it's poverty reduction and things like that. But at the same time, we can understand all this, we can point this out, But ultimately, somebody else has to do this. We can at the most demonstrate, we can at the most advocate and do all these things. So I think, I don't know if my understanding of the civil society space that way is correct. All of you are much more of experts in that. But I think in this whole debate, this whole thing of where can we position civil society is very important, especially because we see in India the space for dialogue with policymakers and others for civil society shrinking, yeah, especially in the last few years. So how do we revive that voice? How do we sort of bring this whole thing into a relevant platform, yeah? And some of us think that, yeah, if we sort of work with government, we're riding two horses or whatever it is, yeah? A lot of people smiling. But I think it is a relevant thing. We have to influence positions of power. We have to work towards, this change and transformation for everybody. Now, one of the takeaways, I think, from this whole global process of the new urban agenda is that you had a general assembly of practitioners which was created, of which we are fortunate enough to have Shipra with us. She is the vice president of that. And that represented a space which a whole lot of people could plug into and try to influence the intergovernmental agenda. And it was originally supposed to end with Habitat 3, but it still continues in the form of different kinds of committees to see how the new urban agenda and SDGs can actually be implemented. So I think what can we learn from that whole process of negotiation, of consultation, and of actually having a kind of a legitimate platform from which civil society can influence agendas is perhaps something which we will hope that Shipra can tell us more about in the national context. How can we do it to take things forward? The other thing which I would just like to place in front of you is that having said that INDCs are the only commitment we have, how can we kind of dovetail the good things from these agendas and the work that all of us have been doing over the years into the INDC process, yeah? Point out what is missing, especially when we're talking about inclusion, poverty, and things like that in cities, the way that cities are growing, merging together, and all sorts of things. Then how is this going to be included in terms of how we get it into the INDCs is something which is very important to point out to policymakers. The other thing is that as far as the SDGs are concerned, the government body which is designated to look after this, to monitor it and to coordinate this is Niti Aayog. And SDGs started functioning in January 2016, yeah, and Niti Aayog went ahead with mapping of ministries against the SDG targets. The second thing it did is that looked at all the central government schemes and which contribute to different SDGs and SDG targets. But after that, we haven't heard anything much. The other thing is that when you look at the 14th Finance Commission, the whole planning commission structure and things like that is, of course, scrapped. So the states will have a lot of power to determine their own agendas, and including what they do with SDG. So how can we as civil society influence the state planning process and the state-driven agendas, which are likely to become more and more important, is, I think, something which I would like the panelists to discuss.